If you are using these type of bulbs, I'll show you the reason why you should not. Here I have a electromagnetic radiation detector. I'm going to turn it on. Okay, we're at 0 right now. As I come to this light bulb, you'll see why you shouldn't use it. That's how much radiation these things emit. I advise you to go back to the old incandescents. This is not healthy for you.
Salutations, you guys, and thank you for tuning in to another edition of Crisis Corner. I've called this one the 2030 Initiative to give you guys a kind of viewpoint, well, a basis right now, because I definitely will expand on this in later segments, a viewpoint of what they're trying to do for the 2030 lifestyle or world that we're going to be in. So this is world government already being established, but them saying that they have their first objective to be set by 2030. And a lot of the things that we're seeing that are going on in society are somewhat of a purposed or at least orchestrated chaos for this end goal. Now, if you've seen any of my other work, you've seen this formula before, the COPSEC, Bill Gates depopulation formula. Well, I'm not going to be going down that one in this episode. What I'm going to be going over is the fact that they're using these types of terminologies to explain the society that we're going to go down and how Agenda 2030 is, how wide it encompasses everything, and what that's really going to do to what we think of, well, as reality. And I'm sure you're wondering, or you at least have questions as to what that means. Well, what they're trying to basically get our mindset focused on, instead of the good old-fashioned American dream for the entire world, is the fact that we need to bring it down a notch. We need to decarbonize society. Things are a little bit crazy right now. Global warming and the collective contribution of society upon the planet is detrimental. Right here I have a quote from Cristina Figueres. At COP21, 195 countries agreed to make sure global warming stayed below 2 degrees Celsius and pursue efforts to limit the temperature rise of 1.5 degrees Celsius. And she is quoted as saying, "We are headed towards a decarbonization of our global economy, no doubt about it." So what that really means is we're really starting to see the economic reformation and the social restructuring of our entire society. Like I said, we're trying to change the mindset of reality, okay? So whenever we have these kinds of things going on, we really have to look at, well, what caused it? What made us get to this point? Why do we need to decarbonize? What is carbon? Well, carbon is what we emit. As I've said before, we breathe carbon. Carbon is everywhere, but they want to try to bring it down. With carbon, what they're going to try and do, and this is what we're seeing, power plants being shut down, they want to convert energy. They want to have no more fossil fuels, everything electric. And we can see evidence of them actually trying to phase out the use and dependence of fossil fuels in Oregon with things such as coal. We can also talk about how they've been trying to tax cars by the mile in Oregon as well. So a number of things are going on over there if you want to look at it being more of the New World Order states in America, but that's just my two thoughts. Before you, I actually have two articles, both of which focus on the idea that Oregon is trying to phase out coal by 2030, or their reliance on fossil fuels by 2030. Governor Kate Brown is stated as saying this in the Oregonian, quote, "Working together, they found a path to best equip our state with the energy resource mix of the future. Now, Oregon will be less reliant on fossil fuels and shift our focus to clean energy. I'm proud to sign a bill that moves Oregon forward, together with the shared current values of now and future generations. While it advocates, the legislation was highly contested, passing by a 38 to 20 vote in the state assembly before it was signed into law. Opponents said it would cost every resident $190 per year in additional energy charges, not substitute, but additional energy charges. Now, I know that sounds silly, but it's very much the truth. And the reason why this is happening is because while we're getting ourselves prepared for the 2030 agenda, the 2030 mindset of sustainable development, we have to combat what's really going on now. That's why they're shutting down power plants. That's why we're seeing a rise and such a fluctuation at the same time in gas prices. Okay, because they're really trying to push out what we think of, as I've said before, normal reality. That's why we're seeing the rise in Priuses, Tesla coming out with all different kinds of cars, and just all different kinds of things, portable heaters, a lot of things that involve electricity, because that is an abundant resource. I could go off for days about the electric universe model and how we're looking at things right now in a three-dimensional gravitational model. But what we're trying to do now with the Agenda 2030 mindset is get the entire planet to that forced compassion realization, to where right now with the carbon emissions, we're being detrimental to the planet by cutting it down, by cutting out our power, by cutting out coal, by cutting out fossil fuels and natural gases, this, that, and the third. We're able to save the planet. And that's the purpose of, well, Agenda 2030, because they're trying to shut down what we think of as normal society. This is why everything's converting. And this isn't a local thing. This isn't going to only apply to Oregon. This is a national or a global agreement. This is something that every nation agrees to. Evidence, or an idea that leads credence to this, is whenever we saw China and America sign the Paris climate deal. And they're planning to sign it on Earth Day, April 22nd. A few days after one of the high occultic holy days, where we're going to see a lot of different types of sacrifices. So, and I'll go into an occult world version about that so we can understand what's really going on. But as you can see below you, the entire world will align itself to a global treaty which usurps our national rights. This is why the world war that's going on right now is not necessarily folly, but orchestrated. It's intended to happen because with the quote-unquote climate and how it has to change, there are certain things that have to take place. What's being conducted now with the climate treaties is our rights as a nation being pretty much just given over to the UN. As they've said in even, I think, what is it? The Hunger Games, where there's different districts that work on different types of things. Talking about production and consumption, trying to lower the global temperature of the entire planet a certain degree. You see, this is what they're trying to talk about. So whenever we're having fights about this, that, and the third, we really have to understand that right now it's just the season of chaos. It's a season of transition. They're trying to get us into this mindset that we need a global agreement or a global understanding of how to handle these types of things. You see. But one of the even more crazier things that we really have to understand when we're looking at this global warming, Al Gore, climate change farce is that it is manufactured, that these numbers are doctored. And I'm not trying to say that, this is all fake, that these things aren't really true and none of this is actually happening. What I'm trying to say is whenever you look at it from the fact that America is one of the biggest consumers, while China is one of the biggest producers, while we have these two huge nations, these world powers signing a global agreement to essentially, like I said, bring down the overall temperature of the planet, that means that they have to cut back on certain things that they're doing. That's why shutting down coal plants and really cutting back on other things that are going on in the nation are going on, you see. They want to have respective domestic steps to approve that it's happening early as possible this year, you see. So this is what I'm saying ties into the fact that they're shutting down coal plants, that they're trying to cut back on all kinds of different things, telling us that we might have to pay a carbon tax, tracking us by the mile, this, that, and the third. They're really being technocrats about this. So earlier, whenever I mentioned the fact that some of these numbers might be doctored, one of the things I was trying to allude to is the fact that Al Gore made this up. Al Gore made this up so he could sell books to Californians, say liberals in California. But at the same time, we really need to understand the massive false flag that's going on right here, because it's easy to debunk the science when the solution is created by the same people who made the issue. And that's one of the even bigger things we need to talk about, because we have chemtrails going on, we have genetic modification of our own plants, this, that, and the third. So we really need to really look at what they're trying to say is climate change, because it could just be a huge farce by these people. So whenever I'm explaining all this information, what I'm really trying to get at is that we're going underneath an economic and social reformation. So one of the things that I thought was interesting, or one of the things that I do see as being interesting, is the fact that we see so many different organizations falling underneath, following orders as far as this climate change agenda, this Agenda 2030 agenda, this economic and social reformation. The Paris Climate Deal, where there's nearly 200 nations that signed a bill or a treaty to end the fossil fuel era. NASA smacking down people in a Facebook discussion who, don't necessarily agree with climate change. A World Bank announcing efforts that, they're trying to help combat climate change. And Christina Figueres again talking about how they're trying to accelerate the program, how the efforts that everybody needs to start taking place in 2018. And whenever the Panama Papers was going on, the CIA orchestrated crime, to try to distract people, Obama was calling for an international tax reform. So we really need to look at what happens whenever society is changing, because these people are making dictatorial statements, but they're alluding to it as if this is something that's beneficial to us, that this is what we need. And while we're doing these types of things, while the science, quote unquote, air quotes, is there to show you that this is going on, that you need to obey Big Brother. And I'll get into this later because I felt like it was very strange. Bill Nye came out the other day talking about how climate deniers need to be arrested because they're affecting his quality of life. That blew my mind. So now we're having more people actually advocate the fact that we need to arrest people because of their beliefs. And there's so many different other implications that come with that. But the fact that we're having a society that is in advocacy of this type of behavior or this type of reality shows you where we're going. And as I said before, with Washington trying to introduce one of the first carbon emissions taxes, we can also see them trying to, quote unquote, clean up society in other aspects. Montreal trying to ban plastic bottles, the U.S. government saying that mobile homes are illegal, them actually pulling children off of the grid whenever they're actually off of grid and pulling them back into the system, and all kinds of other things. Like I said before, the carbon emissions tax, Initiative 732, where Washington could become the first state of the nation to impose a direct tax on carbon emissions from fossil fuels such as coal, gasoline, and natural gas. And basically it would have $25 added on per metric ton of carbon emission. So this is the problem, okay? So now we're actually seeing them say things such as clean up society. No, you can't live in mobile homes because they're not in the grid. They're not they allow freedom. You're able to be you're mobile. You're able to do what you want. We need you in the grid. So those are illegal. We need you to clean up plastic bottles. They're all over the place. You're essentially just creating space and dirt. There's toxic chemicals in them, and you're just letting it riddle the ocean. There's all kinds of different examples that we need to look at whenever we're seeing what this dictatorial government this world dictatorial government is saying, because these aren't things that are actually happening on a national scale. You see, they're happening on a global one whenever you take a step back and look at what's happening to society. As I said before, this is an economic and social reformation. There's all kinds of different things that are going on and that play into this. So I led it with a understanding of Bill Gates' COPSEC formula whenever we're trying to understand how he's trying to bring CO2 down. I'm not going to pick on him in this episode. What I'm trying to pick on is Pope Francis, Frankenpope, one of the advocates, or if anything, the harbinger of the Agenda 2030 religion. This man, if anything, I'm not going to try to paint the picture of a villain, but I'm going to try to have you guys understand how many different things, or at least what this Frankenpope really is. Right here I have him saying that Earth is turning into an immense pile of filth. Sorry for that tongue twister, but what I'm trying to get at is the fact that this is supposed to be a man that's supposed to offer spiritual salvation, peace, hope, and all these other great things, because the world is literally on fire right now, and he is saying that the world is turning into an immense pile of filth. He's not really affecting the spiritual matters so much as he should, so to speak. Before you, I have a number of posts and articles that show you some of the things that this Pope has really said, and I'm not really saying anything. I'm going to let, like I said, the evidence speak for me. Him saying that, well, the Pope hints at the relaxation of contraception bans, calling for a universal fraternity, saying if you don't help the poor and the needy, then you need to pay taxes like a business. Him also saying that this might be our last Christmas, and also giving support for RFID implementation. Oh, did I also say that Christians should be ready for the end of the world? Now, I understand that the Quran and the Holy Bible come from somewhat of the same place. They believe in somewhat of the same God. The three religions: Judaism, Christianity, and I think it's the Islamic religion, yes. But I'm not going to go down that, and if I'm messing up, I'm sorry, because I need to do more research, and I'm also working on it. But what I'm trying to say with Frankenpope is, look at the types of things this man is saying. I could go off for days about the spiritual implications of having someone like Pope Francis, the Frankenpope, come in doing all the things he's trying to do, the occult implications of what he's doing to the spiritual world. Okay, he's inverting everything. He's making spiritual matters seem physical, or physical matters seem spiritual. It's crazy. Did we also forget the fact that he had a secretary die, but her husband, or the person that was impregnating her, was one of the police officers in the Vatican? So we really need to understand who the Pope is and who he surrounds himself with when we're taking a look at all this information. I have a little bit of a short montage for you guys because, well, I'm going to let it speak for itself. Some of these clips are taken from whenever the Pope was addressing Congress here in America. But whenever you're looking at this kind of information, what you really need to do is read between the lines.
We must not be taken aback by the numbers, but rather view them as persons, seeing their faces and listening with their stories, trying to respond as best we can to their situation, to respond in a way which is all we human just. Do unto others as you will have them do unto you.
Preaching the golden rule that we all grew up knowing. Fantastic. So what I'm trying to get at here with the Pope, Frankenpope, is that he's preaching paganism. He's preaching Mother Gaia. He's preaching the doctrine of what I would consider the Green Revolution, the Green Agenda. This is paganism. He's teaching the worldly worship. These are the doctrines of Baphomet. Okay. And I know this sounds silly. Yeah, this is what we should be doing. But half of this comes from understanding, or at least wanting, a world that is materialistic instead of wanting spiritual salvation. And that's what we're trying to seek right now. That's why the world is so lost, is because we're trying to find salvation that can only be provided through God. And what does Pope Francis do? Do unto others as you would do unto them, or have them do unto you. Well, clearly this is the case. And this is probably why he doesn't necessarily like people that poke holes in his doctrine. But that's perfectly fine by me, because I'm still not even done yet. I just wanted to kind of set it up for you guys to understand who exactly is charioting and what exactly is being charioted by this individual. And what I keep having to explain is that it's riding on the very fine skin of our common sense. And the only difference is that it's not spiritually provided to us. It's not an understanding, an awakening that we can come to. It's that forced compassion. So this all somewhat came into, well, not really play, but this is all starting to get documented and at least externalized and put into public view on the global stage back in 2015, whenever they revamped the Agenda 21, whenever they revamped it to Agenda 2030, the same way they revamped the Patriot Act to the Freedom Act. Okay, so all of these different things that are going on, in the same way they updated Al-Qaeda to ISIS, the same way all these things are going on is the same way that there's a universal or the New World Order sitting at the top dictating these types of things. That's why we're seeing such a rapid change in society. Automation of robots, more chemtrail spraying, fracking, earthquakes even. Okay, these are all proponents of what Frankenpope will use to put forth the Agenda 2030. Okay, this is what it will be used as, to say, let's clean up society. Let's clean up how things are. Okay, they have 17 sustainable development goals and 169 specific sustainable development goals or targets. And I'll go into those here in a second. But what we really need to look at, and this is why I'm trying to set it up this way, is because the person that is actually charioting this entire economic and social reformation is a holy figure. This is why why we need to have a separation of church and state, because we're having religious figures actually talk about matters of the flesh. You see, matters of the flesh are being internalized as spiritual things. And to some degree, on a metaphysical scale, I can understand that. But what we really need to look at is the fact that this is man-made. Okay. I recently interviewed with Lori Alexander on 3 Minutes to Midnight, Madison Star Moon of YouTube, where she is a chemtrails activist, where she's contacting the FAA, she's contacting the EPA, she's even contacting the FDA, all these different organizations to try to get answers as far as what's really going on with chemtrails. So I have a little clip that I'll let you guys listen to. Here we go.
Lead, mercury, and depleted uranium.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh,
Wow. If that doesn't scare people to death, I don't know what could wake you up.
There's no excuse for that. You cannot excuse it away.
Right. And I'm going to say something. I live right outside of Midway Airport in Chicago. The planes fly literally when the wind is in the right direction. They literally fly over my house. I can sit right where I am right now at my desk, look outside at my backyard, and I can see the shadow of a plane going over. They're not flying over right now, but when the air current changes, they do. And planes fly the same flight path. So for somebody to say, if you look up in the sky, first of all, say that those are contrails. Okay, there's a big difference between contrails and chemtrails.
mm-hmm.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, Madison, but contrails dissipate within a very short period of time, correct?
Right, we never saw persistent contrails as children or even young adults. Even going back, I first witnessed a chemtrail in 2005. I mean, that's a long freaking time to still be talking about this and nothing's changed. It's only gotten worse.
Right.
That's scary, but I really can only definitively state my eyes have only seen it since 2005. Where were the persistent contrails before? We've had aircraft all this time. They can't just say, and also these cloud formations that NASA's coming up with these names for. You know, when I was growing up, we had 4 clouds. There's 4 types of clouds that we learned about in science class. That's it.
Yeah.
Now we have like 4,000.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, you know, you look up at the sky and it's just not natural anymore.
Well,
You know?
in your 5 years of studying this, Madison, have you noticed, outside of just the general degradation of society, have you noticed, I guess, the effects of chemtrails being sprayed on people? And the effect that people are waking up more to it? Have you noticed any after effects of it?
Yeah, a lot of my friends have come forward to me telling me that they have Morgellons disease, a disease I had never heard of, right? You know, and all of these people, I did a show with a lady that has Morgellons, and it was a really good show. She knew all about it. And after that, you know, people kept coming forward to me telling me that they had Morgellons. That's something crazy. I mean, all these respiratory illnesses, a lot of my friends are sick right now. And, you know, they tell me it's all related to chemtrails. If you look at, like, they all have the same symptoms. You know, and a lot of my friends are getting these weird diseases like lupus and other weird, debilitating diseases, muscle diseases, not multiple sclerosis, but things similar to that. And I mean, unfortunately, I am not showing any signs of anything yet. But does that mean that I don't think I'm poisoned? Hell no. You know, I live on a Superfund site, and we're sprayed every day.
So obviously the evidence is there that man-made global warming is actually happening. Man-made climate change is a real factor. They're spraying aluminum, barium, and strontium throughout the sky. It's affecting how our plants and our soil operate. It's even affecting us. We're absorbing it into our skin. So if this is just on us, I mean, the evidence is there. But before you, I actually have 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So I'm only going to look at a few of them, and I feel like they're not necessarily key points because they're all pretty much essential when you're looking at the Agenda 2030 Sustainable Development situation or the agenda. But I have a few here that I would like to go over with you guys. One, obviously, is important, such as ending poverty. How are they going to do this without getting everybody on a global standard? You see, ending poverty in all of its forms. Well, you know, we have Africa. And now we have Flint developing. I'm not saying, you know, I'm not comparing Flint to Africa. I'm saying that we have cancers all around the world. So are they allowing for this orchestrated chaos to happen so that they can come in with this agenda and try to be the saviors? And goal number 2, where they end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition and promote sustainable agriculture. Now, is this with Monsanto and genetically modified crops? You see? There's all different types of things we need to look at whenever we're paying attention to it. And if you look a little bit further down the line, number 5, achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. Well, that's a very specific one because I feel like, well, without the spiritual understanding, or at least just coming to the agreement that we are all equal, this is, again, more or less that forced compassion. You see, they're trying to control education on number 4, ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. Goal 11, make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. Okay. And number 13, because we all know that the Illuminati love their number 13, take urgent action to combat climate change and its impact. Okay, and this is why whenever we heard with the San Bernardino attacks that climate change made the terrorists do this, what they're trying to say is that through the actual man-made climate change that is occurring, the droughts, the floods, the polar opposites, snow in April, all kinds of different things like this, snow in Hawaii, snow in Australia, this, that, and the third, them modifying the weather through this climate change, some of the impacts that it's having, because it's not necessarily giving these people who have been domesticated in these lands, i.e. the war-torn country known as Syria, that because the climate is changing, that they are now able to, or that they should move somewhere else, that they should migrate because their culture is not what it should be. The rapid degradation of society through its natural environment and humans' impact on it, the pollution of society, and thus the eco-friendly world we're looking for, that climate is changing, and we need to combat it. So what this really does is this puts a global spin, or at least a national attention on what climate change is, on the multicultural agenda. And that's why we're seeing so many different nations take in different Syrian refugees, all of them being from Syria. You see, because this is the season of crisis. Now, and how this kind of ties into what's really going on, because we're already having refugees brought here to America, and we're seeing evidence of this with the Border Patrol as well. We're building a North American community, a North American union. That's why Canada is offering us to come and live with them. That's why Justin Trudeau is palling around with Obama. That's why Obama himself is making declarations saying we should prop up Mexico's economy. That's why the border is not essential. That's why Donald Trump, as radical as it sounds, is making sense, because we're having no borders in this North American union. It's all part of the multicultural agenda caused by this climate change. Well, not hoax, but this climate change orchestration. You see, and this is what they're trying to say is climate change. So whenever they attack it by manufacturing the weather, or at least controlling things, so to speak, what they're really doing is, like I said, advancing the multicultural agenda, pushing us more towards that one world government. One of the things that they're going to try to start doing to give more credence, or at least start building up institutions to start accusing people, to start persecuting people the same way they're persecuting Christians, the same way they're bringing thousands of Muslims in and then 3 Christians. You see, one of the ways they're doing that is by setting up attorney generals united for clean power, which consists of 17 attorney generals whose mission is to stifle any and all opposition to what they wrongly label settled science. Okay, so what that essentially is them arresting climate deniers and climate skeptics. This is what I'm talking about more of whenever I'm saying this is the season of crisis, because we're also hearing how Bill Nye, and I said this earlier in the video, how he says that climate deniers, or people who are skeptical of, or extremely rational of this science, they're affecting his way of life. Now, I know it seems pretty silly, but a lot of these people who are in these positions of power make these subtle statements that don't necessarily seem dehuman or anti-human, but they're not necessarily pro-human, so to speak. The same way I led in with Bill Gates' COPSEC formula, and how people were a part of this formula, and how now even Pope Francis and Christiana Figueres of the UN are also saying that we need to have a decarbonization of society. So these are more words, more key words, more statements that allude toward the fact that they're trying to build a world government based on the fact that the world needs to be taken care of. You see, one thing that I thought was very, very strange, and this recently came out, I think within the past week or so, is that Google is planning to create its own city. Alphabet, Google's parent company, is considering building an entire city from scratch. The boss of Sidewalk Labs, the firm's New York City, described as an urban innovation, what I would consider sustainable development, company mentioned the idea at a summit hosted by The Information. Quote unquote, thinking about a city from the internet up is really compelling, Sidewalk CEO Dan Doctoroff said at the event. The boss of Sidewalk Labs, Alphabet's urban innovation company, mentioned the idea at the summit, hosted by the tech website, The Information. Now, what I think is very strange is we're hearing more and more about microgrids, sustainable development, easy cities, or sustainable cities, so to speak. What this really is, in my eyes, this is the internet building that reality, making these hubs, these microgrids, these cities, these places where you can go that are ergonomically designed for humans. Think about it. I mean, how much information does Google really have? And for them to already understand what's going on, what's being predicted, to have the trends, the models, the pre-crime software, the algorithms, whatever you would want to call them, the artificial intelligence, quantum computing software, you see, having all of this, they're able to efficiently design a city. This is essentially a technocratic statement in saying that they will create a city or a human farm. Because not only will it be able to produce, but it will also consume very less. And that's the very point of this entire video. Because with the Agenda 2030 initiative, what they're trying to do is to get us to a point where we think, or until, not to where we think, but until we act in a fashion where we're conscious of the earth instead of our souls. You see. So in closing, I'd like to point out a few things, or at least point you guys in the direction of a few of my other videos that you can look at that give you a better and more precise view of some of the things that I'm talking about that encompass this Agenda 2030 initiative. In the top right corner, you'll see 3 Minutes to Midnight, episode 13, the recent interview I had with Madison Star Moon, and I was the co-host for Lori. It's a fantastic show. We went over a lot. Did you even know that there was no organization which took care of plane emissions? I didn't learn that until I had the actual interview. Chock full of information. Please check it out. You'll also see my Crisis Corner Autonomous Society. You can check that one out because it has a cool track and you don't have to hear me talk, but it's very informative. And the rise of the technocracy. That gives you a view of what's really going on whenever they're destroying the city, but at the same time giving over rise to these machines that can somewhat take care of us, that are put in a place for us. And lastly, there's the Agenda 2030 and Agenda 2030 microgrids and sustainable development, where I explain some of the cities and the environments that these people are designing and that they're trying to set forward to us. Evidence of this is whenever we can see what's happening in Flint, Michigan, and how they're trying to essentially crumble the country to reform it. So as far as reforming, I'm trying to change up the entire structure as far as how information is delivered and what radio is. Okay, so what happens whenever you guys subscribe to exclusive content? Basically what you heard here plus more. Okay, you're still going to hear this. That's not what I'm doing. What I'm really trying to do is maximize on what I can give to you guys. Okay, on top of the interviews, on top of the videos, on top of the episodes, on top of the documentaries, there's all kinds of different things. Okay, you can have access to the exclusive season 1 because I'm going to start taking that down. I mean, and one of the things I'm really curious about is what brought you guys to the page. You see, how did you guys find me? How did you hear about this stuff? We really need to start talking about it because this is the time. People are willing now more than ever to learn about this type of stuff, and we have the obligation to tell them. But, like I said, if you like what you heard, please subscribe. That's all I really got for you. I want to say thank you guys for tuning in to this edition of Crisis Corner, the 2030 initiative. I know I threw out a lot, but I hope I gave you enough examples to go out and go do your own research. I'm not saying always trust everything I'm saying, but please go out and go do your own research because, there are a lot of things that I don't know. You may know more than me. You might see things in a different light, and that's why we need to have these kind of discussions because the power of we is a lot more important than the power of I, but they need to work in synergy. That's all I really got for you guys. This is Noise Era, Freedom Faction, out.